welcome back. Today I'd like to talk about my top 5 film stocks, but before that I want to mention a few things. As you can probably hear and see, I'm outside right now. I'm in the French Alps, and around there are like sheep and cows and people working with heavy machinery. So if you hear some noise, if you hear the planes passing around, that's totally normal and I cannot control this. But I thought that maybe shooting outside would be nice right now. It stopped raining a few hours ago, and so it's kind of dry outside, so I thought it would be a nice place to talk about my favorite film stock. So let's get into it. So I started to shoot film about 10 years ago now, maybe a little bit more, because my brother and my dad, which are also photographers, started to experiment again with film. And I remember vividly that my first film stock was Fujifilm Superior 200, shot inside a XJ2 Minolta. Very fun experience, but once I got the film back from the lab, I discovered that half of the roll was ruined because there were some light leaks. So I only had a few images that I deemed decent enough despite the light leak to keep. So this was my first experience with film, and it wasn't one of the most nice experience. And that following fall, I moved to Canada to study filmmaking at college, and this is really when I started to shooting films. I experienced with more stock. But anyway, let's talk about my top 5 film stocks, starting with number 5, which is Fuji Superior 200. Like I said earlier, Fujifilm Superior 200 was the first film stock I ever tried, so I had quite a bit of rolls of Superior because this was one of my dad's favorite film stock. So it was always available at home, and then before I left for Canada, I made sure to grab a couple of rolls of Superior 200. So I shot it quite a bit. It's a lovely film stock. It's a consumer film stock that was supposed to be the direct competitor of Kodak Color 200s. So it's also a 200 ISO speed film, but compared to Kodak Gold 200, it has the Fujifilm color palette. So it's a much cooler color palette. It makes beautiful mint-colored greens. I like how it renders blues from the water or the skies with some sort of a cyan. The skin tone are also much cooler, and overall I found that the Fujifilm stocks is more neutral than the counterpart Kodak Gold 200. I love Gold 200, but it's very warm, and that's hence the name Gold. And on top of that, you can also sometimes find a palette of undertones of magentas or purples. And I found that those suits very well when you shoot sunrise and sunsets. It's a very versatile film stock, and to get the best results, I meter my Superior 200 at 100 ISO, So with that, it means that I have very clean shadows. I don't have those muddy shadows, and it has a very nice latitude towards the highlights. So even though that I overexpose by one stop, I still have plenty of details in the highlights. And that's why it's one of my favorite film stocks, because it was affordable, it had great color renditions, and it was easy to use. Unfortunately, I think that Fujifilm Superior 200 no longer exists. From what I could read online, it was discontinued in North America back in 2017, but I was still able to find some even last year. I remember buying some from France a couple of years ago, maybe last year, but I could never find it in North America. Now, last month when I went to the camera stores, I couldn't find it anymore. So I'm trying to get some online if I can, but that's why I don't have one to show you at the moment. Now it seems that the sun is now gone, so hopefully it won't rain again on me, but just let's move on and talk about my fourth favorite film stock, which is Kodak Color Plus 200. I discovered Kodak Color Plus 200 by mistake. It was post-pandemic, and just when the film factory was trying to relaunch their manufacture of films, so it was quite difficult to outsource some film stock. So I couldn't find Superior 200s, I couldn't find the Kodak lines. It was in a small store in Coquitlam. And the only color film left he had really was this kind of Kodak film. It was in an orange and red box. And so it was really, really odd. And even the canisters, I mean, it has this kind of very old style design to it. I mean, it has this those lines, and it was supposed to produce very muted colors and I would say medium contrast. So bought it in 2021, and then I went on a trip to through the Rockies from Vancouver to Alberta, and that's where I shot my first true roll of it. And I didn't really shot much of it. I was like just treat it as like Kodak Gold 200, so I metered at ISO 100s and I just shot away. But it's when I got the film back from the lab and scanned it myself that I truly discovered the nature of Color Plus 200s. I mean, I couldn't really see those muted colors that people talked about online. Maybe this is due to the fact that I used a polarizers on the landscapes, and really those colors were just beautiful. I mean, it has like a very, I would say, a bold contrast. It has some sort of like vintage look to it, if it means anything. And maybe this is due to like those muted colors. But with the polarizer, it just like those colors are right into your face, especially the blue skies, and then I remember shooting like the Udus in drumellers with it, and the earth and the sand and the rocks, they all like kind of like pop right into your face. Beautiful yellows. It is a bit of a warmer film. And after that, I even shot this film in Tofino and Nikkor Lake on Vancouver Island. So you have more of like the fog and the color of the Pacific. But even then, it just looked beautiful. I just don't know what they put in this emulsion, but it's like nothing I've seen in the Kodak line. It has this very, very distinctive look. It has a lot of characters, so I would definitely not call it a neutral film stock. And I tend to like more a neutral film stock, but this one, it does something in it that I just truly love. Beautiful film stock. If you can find one or two rolls, I strongly suggest you try it if you haven't done so. All right, and we are now reaching the podium, and in number 3, I call Kodak Portra 160 and not 400, and I'm gonna tell you why. So the current line of Portra family is made of Portra 160, Portra 400 and Portra 800. And this is a brand new family. It was released in the early 2010 I believe. And before that they had another family of Portra, which was divided in 2 categories. You had the natural NC for natural colors and VC for vivid colors. And those are, I believe, between 160 and 400 ISOs. The 800 ISO of the Portra is a brand new one that didn't exist in the past. And so those are like the brand new emulsion, and I think this is one of the favorite Kodak film out there for many photographers. And most photographers will solely rely on the Portra line 400. And for a while, like many photographers, the Portra 400 was my favorite of the Portra family. I mean, it's at 400 ISO, it's very versatile, it has a wide latitude, whether it's in the highlights and even in the shadows. You can basically throw anything at it and it will look decent. So I mean, it's basically one of the favorite film stock of the Kodak line for many people out there. And I really liked it as well in the beginning, but then I found that the Portra 400, despite being very versatile and having a very natural contrast, also has a very warm base, which is something that the 160 doesn't have. And lately I found that this warm base is like, I can see it in lots of other film stock. Like I said, the Color Plus is very warm as well, the gold is very warm, so I wanted something that was more natural. And my first result with the 160 back in college were just a disaster. But then I saw my dad using the Portra 160 and he asked me to scan his rolls. Everything was perfectly exposed. It didn't have those brown muddy shadows that I had a few years ago. I said to us witchcraft, because he was able to perfectly expose Portra 160, and I was like, how did you do it? How can you work with that film stock? It's a low ISO film, how can you do it? And he's like, what do you mean it's a low ISO film? I mean, 160 is plenty enough. My dad and my grandfather, they worked with Kodak 64, they worked with ectac 100. These days we're so used to, like, first of all, digital cameras, we can like just crack up that ISO. And with film stock such as like the Portra 400, the Portra 800, 160 is plenty enough. When you know how to use it, it just looks gorgeous. So from now on, Portra 160 is my favorite film stock of the Portra line, and I would strongly recommend that you retry it. If you tried it in the past and you didn't like it, I think the color palette is much more natural than Portra 400 or even 800. I usually meter it at the ISO 100. I even try to push it to one stop, and yes, there is a color cast, but it still produces like decent results. So again, if you had some issue in the past with 160, I strongly suggest you retry it. Set your ISO at 100, shoot it under like enough light, because it's another thing. We often try to shoot like bad light and hope that the film stock will just fix it. not the case. Alright, two left, and for the second place on the podium I called a black and white film made by Ilford, and this is Ilford HP5. So HP5 is another one of those film stock that at first I tried a couple of years ago and I hated it because I didn't know how to shoot it, which is kind of odd when you think about that with the HP5. But anyway, my dad's favorite film stock for black and white was FP4, which is the one I use the most. But when I went into college, into filmmaking, I needed like a higher ISO film to shoot the behind the scenes of our film sets. And so first of all, I looked at which film stock to get, and most of the online community told me to try out the Kodak Tri-X400, which I did, which is a very lovely film stock. It's kind of like this film stock that's legendary now, Tri-X, and it really creates this kind of like amazing look straight out of the camera. I mean, it's something that, of course, there is the work that the lab is doing on it, but it just looks gorgeous out of the box, so it seems. It has beautiful contrast. The grain is very fine but nostalgic grain, if it means anything. Yeah, I really liked the Tri-X 400s. And then I tried HP5 because I was like, okay, well, I need to try more film stock. So I basically bought the entire line of Ilford film, and in that was the HP5, which I shot on an overcast day. And when I got the result back from the lab, at the time I wasn't scanning it myself, I was just like very disappointed with HP5. I shot on an overcast day. I shot a snowstorm with it. There was some blizzard in northern Ontario. And I just got those very dull images with no contrast compared to Tri-X, and those faded blacks almost. I was like, what is this? I mean, how this thing can compare to Tri-X? So I left it on the side for a while. Not until Tri-X kept like rising up in price, and I was like, okay, I no longer will buy a $20 Tri-X. So I went back to the HP5 when I started to develop my own film at home, and I found that the HP5 was one of the easiest film to develop, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna try it again. This time I learned how to shoot it properly, and since then, this is my favorite black and white film stock. I mean, HP5 is, I often call it the raw of black and white film. You can throw anything at HP5. You can pull it to ISO 50, you can push it to ISO 3200, you can do anything with it. You can like stack filters, you can mess up your developing times. HP5 will still look decent. It's just incredible. I don't know how the Ilford they can do it. I don't know how they can make such a versatile film. And yes, if you just develop it, you shoot it normally at 400, you develop it normally, and you ask for like no editing at the lab, or if you don't do any edits, you might find that it's a very dull film stock. It's true, but that's the power of HP5, is that this kind of medium to low contrast is there so that you can experiment with it in your develop time to add more contrast. You can change your developers to get a bit, maybe a bit more like a fine grain or bigger grain but more contrast. I guess you can push it. You can use tons of black and white filter with it to change the contrast. I mean, it's so versatile that I think this is the film stock that's one of the best, if not the best, black and white film stock out there. And on top of that, it is much cheaper than Tri-X. And my favorite way of shooting HP5, hey, silence, little bird. My favorite way to shoot HP5 is to push it to EIA 800s with a red filter in front. And I get amazing contrast. I did that for a series of photos through the Canadian Rockies, and I just love the contrast I got out of the skies. It's just, with a red filter, HP5 push one stop, it's just, you should really try it. Alright, we are now in position 1 on the podium, and I think my choice is going to be very odd for a lot of people, but my favorite film stock is Kodak Ectac 100. And I can already hear the haters, like the birds. I think the birds don't like Ectac 100s, but Ectac 100 is a beautiful film stock that Kodak resurrected back in 2019. I had heard a lot about Ectachrome. My dad told me he shot tons of Ectachrome. I had seen what he shot with it. He shot some beautiful landscapes of the French Alps on Ectachrome 100. My grandfather shot Ectachrome. So gorgeous photos out of Ektachrome 100. It's a legendary film stock that I think is very close in popularity than the Kodachrome 64 and the Kodachrome line. But Ektachrome 100 is just this legendary thing that when you know how to shoot it, which is something important here, it's just produced amazing images with natural colors, I would say medium contrast, and it's just like, it's the best way to reproduce the actual colors of a scene. I think there is nothing more accurate than the Ektachrome 100. Even the Fujifilm, whether it's the Velvia, all of those have some sort of like look to it, but the Ektachrome 100 is just, I just love that film stock. And yes, I've already made a video about Ektachrome where I talk more deeply about it, and you can view it around here. But in short, it's a color reversal film that Kodak resurrected in 2019. It's available in 35, 120. I think it's also available for like for the cinema lines, and they also have, I believe, the larger sheets for it. And it's only one film stock. Before, in the past, they had like tons of Ektachrome. You had the Ektachrome VC, you had the Ektachrome T for tungsten. They had tons and tons of Ektachromes. All of that is gone, and now you only have one Ektachrome, which is daylight balanced. But every single time I shoot Ektachrome 100, I just love the result I get from it. It's, like I said, it's a very difficult film stock to use. It cannot be shot like the way you would shoot color negative films. I mean, with slide film, you need to expose for the midtones, and then you need to be very sure of your exposure, because if you slightly underexpose Ektachrome, it's kind of fine, but if you overexpose it, it's just ruined. But again, the colors you get out of Ektachrome are simply amazing, and they're just like the most natural color I've ever seen. Recently, I shot the south of France on a roll of Ektachrome, and I just love the color out of it. And I even used a polarizer filters on top of it to cut the reflection on the water, and the colors are just simply amazing. If I could just shoot one film stock for the rest of my life, that'd be Ektachrome 100, if it wasn't that expensive. And that's the main issue about Ektachrome 100, the price. Since Kodak resurrected in 2019, the price kept just rising and rising and rising, and the last roll I got cost me $30 Canadian before tax. And that's just insane, because on top of that, you have to add the E6 development, which is also more expensive than the standardized C41. So shooting Ektachrome and shooting slide in general in 2024 is more expensive than shooting a color negative, and that's simply insane, because in the past, slide film used to be the cheap alternative to color negative film. I mean, that's the reason why my dad and my grandfather just kept shooting on the positive film on and on and on, whether it's Kodachrome, Ektachrome, or the Fujichrome, because it was cheap and more affordable than negative. And the craziest part is back then, when you used to buy a roll of Ektachrome 100, it would come into a little box, and you would shoot it, and then in the little box there will be like a small envelope, and then you would just simply send the roll back to Kodak. For us it was Kodak France, and the letter already had like the stamps on it, so you would just simply drop it into your mail, and you would get the film back, and it was already paid for. So yes, when you used to buy a roll of Ektachrome, the price of development was already included, which is insane to think about these days. So you would just get the little box stamped Kodak, and you would have your little slide mounted already. So if you had the machine, you could just share them with the whole family to see the trip you made during the holidays. So there you have it, my top 5 film stock. And just to quickly recap, we have in number 5, Fujifilm Superior 200, which I believe is no longer with us. Color Plus by Kodak, beautiful film in its own little world. Portra 160, yes, odd choice compared to 400, but like I said, 160 is the king in my opinion. HP5, king of black and white film, and in number 1, the Ektachrome 100. But what did you think of those film stocks? Are those some of your favorites? What's your top 5? Let me know the one that you didn't like in the comments below, because I always enjoy talking about film stock with photographers, which ones they like, which ones they don't, the whys. It always sparks some interesting conversations. So let me know in the comments below, and I'll make sure to answer. And if you want to try one of these film stock for yourself, I've included links in the description below, and those are affiliate links. So if you purchase a film stock through those links, I will get a small commissions, and it does help the channel, so thank you in advance. That's for me guys, thank you for watching. I hope you got something out of this video. And if you did, please consider liking and subscribing so I can do more of those videos in the future. Bye for now.